Hey everybody, welcome to the Purpose People podcast. Today I've got Andy Platts from Jara Solutions. So welcome.
Hi there, good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to get you on the podcast. We've known each other a few years now, and for me, just to share a little bit about your journey, understand your journey, I know will help a whole load of people. So Andy, when did it all begin? Were you a ZX Spectrum type person? Where did it all begin, like the whole computing world?
Computing thing for me, probably at school.
Yeah.
So when I was in the sixth form, I was doing A-level maths, and the school had two computers. They were the first computers in the school. When went into the sixth form, they had an Apple II for the maths department and an Apple II for the admin department.
Apple, right, straight off the bat. Look at that.
Yeah, although I've kind of drifted away from that as time has gone on. The company hasn't, but I have. But yeah, at that time there was very little available in terms of programs and things for them, or at least if it was available, we didn't have access to it. So started off actually doing programming. A mate of mine and we wrote a sort of moon landing kind of program.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it started. Kind of deviated away from that because I never really pursued programming to any great degree, but certainly kept a keen interest in IT generally.
So, what was the other computer? I think we had, was it BBC Micro?
Yep, and they were big in education. So when I went, I studied in Cardiff for a couple of years, and the BBC Micro formed part of...
was it any relation to the BBC, or was it just...
yeah, because it was part of an education programme that the BBC were behind.
Right, okay.
So that's where the name came from.
Yeah, I didn't even make the connection until I said it. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, the microprocessor they used was an affordable one, and in the same kind of idea, maybe more now around Raspberry Pi. Maybe that's a bit passé now, but certainly it was an idea of putting... computers into the hands of children so that they could learn skills right from the outset in something affordable and practical for them.
So you obviously Apple II was like, something that you had at school, whatever. What was your first computer then? What did you get?
So the first computer I owned was kind of a hand-me-down from a Canadian friend of mine, which was a Commodore 64.
Oh, yeah.
So, which would have been in the early 90s, I think. And that was quickly followed then by I think it was a 386 laptop. No, it wasn't. It was a 286 Olivetti with a 100 megabyte hard drive, which in those days was enormous.
Yeah.
And then we went overseas and we needed something more portable, so that was when we got, I think, a 386 or 486 laptop.
Yeah, because I think I was in that year where we got a Spectrum. And I remember the school was very much a divide between the Commodore users and the Spectrum users, and there was always this debate. Well, Commodore's got colour, and Spectrum had like 8 colours or 9 colours, and it was just always a raging debate. And I think then Spectrum went to 128, where they then started to add some colour into it, and then Amstrad come on the scene, didn't they? And I think they swallowed up Sinclair Spectrum.
But that competitive thing is, I think, also it drives innovation.
Yes, 100%.
Whether it's PC, Mac, maybe more so these days, but also I think it drives a bit of interest because it actually drives a discussion that people engage in.
Yeah, so I remember then I think because then it went at 8-bit, 16-bit, and that's when I moved to consoles. And I was like, you know what? So I think my first jump out of that was going to Toys R Us and seeing the Master System, Sega Master System.
Yeah.
And obviously they had the NES, which was Nintendo, so that was their battle and stuff. And then ultimately, I think what happened then is that Sega come out with the Mega Drive, and that's when it really started to take off. Like consoles were a viable option. But in terms of computing, I think when I went to college, I ended up we went to college, and they were all Apple based, and it's part of the reasons why I went to that particular college, because at the time they were all Apple based, so you would learn how to use all the programs, and obviously they were teaching us graphic design communication and stuff, so it absolutely fit. And so then that's, I guess, where my loyalty to Apple came and my despise for the PC world came in, and I think it's always a raging debate even now. And I think if you are an Apple user, it's kind of like you've become like an Apple evangelist, and then I think if you're a PC user, you're like, why you pay so much money for so little, and it goes on and on. So From your perspective, you mentioned that you grew up in school, so you played with the Apple II, and then you said you moved to overseas. Was that a big gap between that, or?
So I actually joined the BBC. You know, we'll give them another mention. So
okay.
And maybe we'll just roll back a bit here for context around both computers and also, you know, what's driven that journey in my career. While I was a student in London, I spent a year studying in London. I became a Christian while I was there, and at the time, I'd say it was definitely a starting point. I then dropped out of where I was studying in London after that year, worked for a year, and then went and studied in Cardiff for 2 years. And while I was there, and my girlfriend at the time kind of challenged me about whether I had any idea what I was going to do with my life, and you know, like girlfriends do now and again. And she also questioned, you know, is there something that you maybe feel that God has for you?
Yeah.
And I didn't have a clue, and I'd not really thought about it that hard. And I took the opportunity to write to a few Christian organisations that were involved in audio and broadcasting.
Okay.
Because at that time, that was one of my main drivers, was maybe more around audio than it was around computers.
Okay. Yeah.
Did a bit of work in a recording studio. It was passion I inherited from my dad. And I wrote to, I think, 8 or 10 different organisations, and most of them wrote back and said, yeah, you know, kind of, you're still a student, go away. And one of them said, oh, come down, have a conversation, interview. And I did. And they said, after that, they said, yeah, we're really interested in, you know, what potentially we could work together. They said, go away and get some experience.
Yeah.
And I said to them, yeah, what would you suggest? And they said, oh, the BBC would be good. So I said, okay, I'll give that a go. I didn't particularly realise at the time that applications for engineering in the BBC, they were about 1 in 400 applicants were successful. It was a very competitive arena. And I landed up having the interview on the day before I had my final project hand in. And I must admit, my head wasn't really in it. I was kind of thinking I need to get this project in, and I failed the interview. And I kind of said, you know, put that one behind me. And then I went off and I volunteered working for a Christian group out on the continent, and spent the summer there. And
Whereabouts?
so that was with Operation Mobilisation.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah.
In Belgium and in Holland, and running the technical aspects of the conferences they had there.
Oh, so it's a massive organisation. It's like quite impressive.
Yeah, fantastic what they do. And it creates, I think it can be a real stimulus for young people to consider what they might want to do with their life and their faith. Yeah. And for me, I was challenged by a chap who we subsequently came across again, a Mauritian guy, Bertie, and he'd said you should reapply to the BBC, and he felt that was something you should really pursue. So when I got back, I reapplied to the BBC, at which point I found out you couldn't reapply for the same job. But interestingly, they came back to me and said, well, I found out when I had the second interview, they said, firstly, you can't reapply for the same job. Secondly, we don't normally re-interview at all, but the interviewer put a note on your past application that should I reapply, do make a point of interviewing him.
Ah, there you go.
And I was successful that time.
Yep.
My head was in the game.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, the first job I'd applied for, unknowingly and wittingly, was for Broadcasting House. The job that I secured was with World Service in Bush House.
Yep, I've been there.
Yeah. Not a BBC site anymore, but...
No, we went there and took their desks.
Oh, okay, there you go. Well, that says a lot, yeah.
Many years ago.
But it proved to be far more relevant in terms of what I learnt there over the 4 years I worked with the BBC, that then formed the foundation of what I then went out, before I went overseas, with FIBA Radio, some people know them as, in Seychelles.
Right, okay.
So, and it was in that 4 years that I worked for the BBC, I continued to develop my interest in IT. The final project that I ran while I was there was just the time, for anybody who's old enough to remember, when portable appliance testing came in. This is when you safety test, PAT testing, it's often known as, portable equipment, and that was a project I ran.
Okay.
For the whole of the BBC World Service at Bush House, and it involved, part of it was hooking up a computer and being able to produce the results, and then partway through that there was a big internal change around the way that they were organising the finance of the World Service. That meant that internal departments needed to be able to essentially charge each other, so they needed to have an asset register. So then the project morphed into they were more concerned about the assets than they were about the electrical safety being the top priority for completing the project. So that was quite interesting, and it was a good.
So that's obviously so you're managing quite a large project for a large organisation such as the BBC, and obviously there's that thing undergirding where you've got that aspect of faith, and I'm sure out of that, with the organisations that you went with, like Operation Mobilisation, there's that thing to give back as well. So when did you start to feel the pull to do it yourself? I mean, some people would say, well, just work for the BBC for 40, 50 years, there'll be a pension at the end of it, and you've got to, it's hard enough to get in the first place. You seem to have it all, which you experienced and got in. What was the thing that was pulling you out, if you like? Yeah,
so I spent 8 years in Seychelles, which was at the point where I came back from Seychelles that things changed. So while I was there, I did 2 years. I worked with as a broadcast systems engineer. I then actually swapped roles with what was the chief engineer. The role then became head of engineering. So I then ran the engineering side of things for the last 6 years that I was there.
Yeah.
But the nature of being an expat working overseas, it's not if you come back, it's when you come back.
Yeah.
And 2000 was the year that it felt the right time to come back. We had 2 children, were both born over there. And it was actually the invitation from my brother. He had his own business, working by himself, doing IT, and he invited me to join him in his business.
Right. Okay.
So,
and did that excite you, or was it like, oh, that's my brother?
It's an interesting one. My wife's a New Zealander, and we'd looked prior to that, should we go to New Zealand? Should we go to UK?
Yeah.
And the invitation from my brother seemed quite a clear opportunity to us to pursue.
Yeah.
And yeah, it seemed like a good way to sort of get back into something in the I almost said real world. That's not necessarily true, but when you're working overseas, it is a bubble to some extent. And then
when you say that you work overseas, is it? Do you don't necessarily feel like you're integrated in the country? You feel like you're in a bit of a bubble. Is that the best way to describe it?
A little bit, I think. I mean, we've actually going back again this year, and we'll meet up with people that we know, locals from our time there, and we didn't keep ourselves in an expat bubble like some people do, but it's still, it's only temporary.
Yeah, okay.
And that's the thing. It can't be a permanent thing because you're there on a work permit and it's tied to your role there.
Yeah.
So came back, and going into business with my brother was then the starting point of actually really getting into business rather than being an employee.
Yeah.
And getting more into computers, because that was exclusively what we did then, whereas at the radio station we had everything from pneumatics, 300-foot masts, structural civil engineering, undersea, 100-kilowatt transmitters, the lot. Very much a focus around IT then with my brother, and we did that for about 6 years. Mm-hmm. And Nick, his primary audience was the domestic market and micro businesses, and my emphasis was more around the business B2B rather than B2C, business to consumer, business to business. And as a consequence, I could do what he did, but he couldn't do what I did, which then meant taking time out was more difficult, particularly, wife, kids. And so that sort of pulling in different directions. And it was then in 2006 that my wife and I formed Gyra Solutions.
Right, okay.
And that was then, so rather than being a partnership, we own limited company. Raywin did the admin and the finance, and I did all the other things that you do in a business.
Yeah.
Such is the nature when you start in business.
So just so I'm clear, so you were in a partnership to start off with, and then you went to essentially setting up the limited company, and he come to work for you. Was that?
No. So we split. He's still my brother.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But we
you went in your own direction.
Yeah. So he kept running his business.
Let's explore that, because for me that's interesting. You said he's still my brother. Was it difficult, that transition, or not?
I think at the time there's probably always a slight awkwardness around that.
Yeah.
And I was very conscious that in making that split, I wanted to treat him right and not compromise his ability to work well. So we weren't after the market that he was after, and vice versa. So I made sure that when I was talking about what we did, it was very much focused on the business to business side of things, to make that clear. And he's pretty much retired now. Well, he has retired now.
So what are you now? So that was when, 2006?
Yeah.
So you're approaching your 20th?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's almost on us.
Yeah. And so 20 years in the IT, what's the biggest thing that's changed, would you say, from when you started to now? What's the biggest shift?
I think there's a few things.
Mm-hmm.
Biggest shift. So cybersecurity was much, much, much less of a thing now. If you're in IT and you don't factor in cybersecurity, you're probably not actually in IT. You just can't ignore it.
Yeah.
Back in the day, then if you had an antivirus, well, that was all you needed, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Times have changed enormously, but I think also the other changes that I've seen are Nick used to build his own computers to sell. I think there's very few people that build their own computers these days, unless you're a real sort of enthusiast. Companies, the WE legislation came in. That was another thing, waste electrical and electronic recycling sort of regulation. So much more, the big companies dominate, but reliability's gone up. So people are less concerned about hardware reliability these days.
Right.
It's much more about system reliability and security. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, in our sector, at the time when I was working with Nick and started Gyra, IT support was pretty much about break fix. Wait for it to break, fix it.
Yeah.
The move towards managed services, we would refer to our business as being an IT MSP, managed services provider, IT managed services provider. Then that idea around prevention and actually giving a reliable, secure environment that people can work in, and IT then becomes a tool, not a distraction, is probably the other big change.
I think it's one of those things, we find it, like we obviously host our own websites and stuff with creation, and we get into that debate sometimes where, what are we paying you for? And we're like, well, we're making sure the plugins are updated, so on and so forth. And then when it breaks, it's like, what are we paying you for? And so you end up with this thing as you're continually trying to justify your existence. And obviously that's on a micro scale. But for yourself, I think that's often the case, isn't it? It's like when nothing goes wrong, it's like, well, what are we paying you for? When something goes wrong, what are we paying you for on a much bigger scale?
And that is an absolutely key conundrum or factor in what we do. And we started doing managed services around 2016.
Yeah.
So it wasn't something we could do straight away. And there are a number of factors that are critical around allowing us to do that. Because if you have a client who's paying you a fixed fee each month, they have an unlimited call on their time.
Yeah.
And that could be seen as much of a liability as it is an asset to our business.
Yeah.
So wanting to get to the point where we could provide an environment that was locked down, managed, controlled in a way that we could mitigate that risk was really, really key. So that's one side, making sure that we didn't enter into it until we were ready and felt it wasn't going to break our business. And then secondly, conveying to the customer exactly what you're saying, that kind of conundrum about what are they paying for. No company wants to feel they're paying out a load of money and they can't understand or reconcile what it is they're getting back. And if it feels like what they're getting is a moving mouse on a screen and an invoice every month, that doesn't feel like value.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we work at is to try and help our customers keep that connection, that the reliable, secure environment that they find themselves working in is a direct product of what we do, not something that's entirely random and not valued.
Yeah, I think that's the thing for us. So we've created what is essentially a help desk, and we have a role within our team that is basically dealing with support tickets. You know, can you just change this logo, or can you just upload this text, which is included in our base package. But I still find even today, there's still people that don't get that a website is not one and done. You know, and sometimes it's one of the hardest things to educate someone that says, well, I paid for it. It's fine, isn't it? And I was like, have you got a phone? Yes. How often do you update your apps? Well, quite a lot. Exactly, because there's a reason for it. So it's whether they want to understand or whether whether they're willing to understand is another question. But I do find that's the biggest education part with software and on IT, that it needs to be maintained, it needs to be looked after, and it's not, I bought a computer, I put it on my desk, I use it for the next 7 years, and then I change it. It's a living, breathing thing, and you need help.
But I think one of the commonalities that we would have in our businesses is if you're talking to somebody who has either directly had a security incident or has had a close call, either to themselves or someone that they know well, that does change the nature of the discussion.
Yeah, of course.
So that's one key element, and particularly with that factor in mind, one of the things that can hopefully really engage people's minds is the fact that to date, none of our fully managed customers has ever had a security breach. Yeah, and that's a rare statistic these days. We say people, it's not something we can ever guarantee. You just can't guarantee. Nobody makes a piece of security software that guarantees you'll never be hacked. But we use a multi-vendor, multi-layered approach with the way that we do our security for our customers that to date has proved to be effective, not been penetrated. So it's not a given. But I think the other fact that we have that helps engage our customers slightly different, that may be slightly different to what can be done in your market, I'd be interested in your thoughts on that, is that we recognise that IT is a tool in the business, but it can be a tool that just helps you crank the handle, or it can be a tool that can really drive the business forwards. I think there is that balancing act to say, right, if we're going in this direction, we've got to back it. I mean, you know, within creation, for example, we've shifted from video editing and obviously building desktop publishing magazines, brochures and websites and stuff, whatever. And now we're moving into the 3D realm, and that is a different game. And already we're like, we're going to have to invest in different graphics cards. Now we're looking at mapping software and looking at drones. So we're now moving in a direction that is a little bit different than what we're used to, but technology plays an absolute key part in it. And and I think that's the thing. If you've got a strategic partner like yourself, you go, well, this is the route we're going in. If we were to go this, what do you think we would need? And then you can go, well, you can do this, you've got that service, you've got that, and you can map it out. And I think you're right. I mean, for forward-thinking businesses, you need an IT technical partner to help invest wisely. Because I think I've gone from being really keen in it, very involved in it, tinkering around, maybe not coding, but if coding, I tried I can't know if you can remember, where you get the magazine and it'd be code your game, and you would literally write all the code out, and then eventually you go and it wouldn't work. You're like, you got a little typo in there.
And you're like, how do I fix it? But you would have like 4 to 8 pages that you've typed out meticulously, and they go run, and it doesn't run. It's like, oh my gosh. So I think that kind of bruised me a little bit in coding. But the point of it is that with so many advancements in this area, with the aspects of AI and the dangers of AI and all those other things, it's like you need someone that knows more than you in that area. And I think now where I've got to is I'm not that person that tinkers or anything anymore. I'm more, what's the big picture and how do we get there?
Yeah.
From a strategy perspective, and we're working with a few organisations that are heavily in AI now, and the challenges that come with that. But it's strategically focused, but I need strategically focused IT people to go bounce stuff off of, and I think if you're serious to grow as a business, you need people like that,
I'd agree, and I think the target market, the customers we engage best with, are typically ones that employ up to 100 or 200 people.
Yeah.
And the nature of organisations of that size means that under most circumstances, they're not big enough to warrant having a big IT department.
Yeah.
Their actual IT resource they need is fairly limited, and I would argue in almost every circumstance is best done in an outsourced way, because you land up typically with one of two problems with organisations of that size. If you're employing somebody to run the IT for an organisation of that kind of size, then more often than not you'll land up with one of two kinds of people. And
Yeah.
I've seen them both, and they're both problematic. One is the person that's got it all going on up here. They are absolutely on it with their IT, and they want to try all the latest things.
Yeah.
And they will do a bit of this and a bit of that, and we've got to do... And they land up building a monster.
Yeah.
Because they've tried all the latest things. The IT budget runs away with them.
Yeah.
Because that's what is A, keeping them there, and B, keeping them interested.
Yeah, yeah.
And the monster can often be a horribly unreliable, fragile beast.
Yeah.
Because of all these things that they've tried. And we've rescued one or two companies, organisations from that kind of setup. Systems wouldn't stay up reliably for more than a week or two. Or the other one is the complete opposite, the lack of ambition, that actually realistically there's not enough to keep someone that's really got it going on up here really well engaged in that kind of environment, because it's going to be very much a kind of business as usual kind of environment. So it means that strategic input and ambition to help drive a business forward is not there.
Yeah.
So actually engaging with an organisation like us, we have, in any 1 year, we'll typically deal with about 350 different organisations. And the depth and breadth of what we see enables us to provide a different kind of breadth and depth to our customers that can really benefit them.
Yeah.
And we do aim to work at kind of three levels. There's two charities, existing customers that we're working with, that we're looking to take their engagement up to the next level, where it's not just about this IT support and prevention, it's around the strategic element in two kind of ways. So one of these charities is a national charity, and they have ambitions to keep growing significantly. And they, on their own internal analysis, they've worked out that realistically they need someone like a CTO, Chief Information Officer, CIO, CTO type role. But can they realistically keep somebody busy? So maybe a part-time. They've also recognised they need someone, kind of IT managery type person, to keep the business as usual compliance alignment things working well, as well as kind of hands-on IT. And that's an enormous expense for an organisation that isn't really large enough to warrant those right now, but they've recognised they need those three tiers. And those are exactly what we can deliver to them. So we deliver what we refer to as a VCIO, or Virtual Chief Information Officer role. We have a technical alignment piece that keeps them suitably secure, appropriate, reliable around the functional level, as well as your basic help desk type functionality. And our aim with all of our customers, because they're paying a customer that's fully managed, they're paying us a fixed fee, they're not going to pay us anything extra if they have a problem.
No. So
we are entirely focused on making sure they don't have a problem. So a problem for them is as much a problem for us. So actually getting that technical alignment right so that we can deliver that reliable, secure environment is win-win.
Yeah, and I think for me, like again with IT, it's one of those things that it's a necessary expenditure, but like it's not necessary. it's reframing how you make money of it, because often people go, I've been in a large charity organisation, they go, well, it's not going to make us any money if we upgrade our servers. It might not make you money directly, but when it's not working, everyone feels it, and then you've got staff not working, and then that's going to cost you money. So for me, it's just understanding that that having someone with the insights that you have with that technical roadmap, and maybe not the technological bias as well, because sometimes we got you get that somebody, we only have to use Apple, or we only have to use these PCs or whatever, and it's their bugbear, it's what they want rather than what is best for the organization. So I think for me it's a very deep subject, but with the world going more and more and more digital, even to the aspects of metaverse and beyond, it isn't going away.
No,
it's getting more. I mean, we're talking about big, huge data centers being built now because of the power of AI and the processing the information. It's just is growing exponentially. So, I think for me, how do you, like, when you talk about charities and stuff, is that your give back where you help charities? Do you have you talk about equipment, because obviously you'll go into an organisation, maybe to upgrade their equipment. Is that part of your give back process as an organisation?
So there's a variety of things there. So we look after around about 40 charity not-for-profit organisations,
okay.
And they get preferential rates.
Yep.
We also work with them to make sure they maximise the benefits that are available to them as charities and not-for-profits.
Yeah.
The various schemes that.
The software is incredible, isn't it? Like the payment and subscriptions, for example, and the difference in prices between
the commercial and the not-for-profit pricing.
Yeah.
And not all charities can avail themselves of that. It depends on the particular emphasis of the organisation and what it is they want to help towards. But certainly, helping them succeed is a key part of what we want to do in terms of give back. And I think helping them understand, going back to that other organisation, helping them understand that we can provide what they need for less than the price of either an IT manager or a chief information officer.
Yeah.
And the difference is, not only is it less than the cost of either one of those, but we'll provide all of the services that they would then have to buy on top of that within that price.
Right.
Because we don't, the whole thing about supporting people in a way that isn't a liability to us means making sure that we control, lock down, monitor, manage that environment in a way that we know will be secure. So we're not going to support people without putting those pieces in place. So it is phenomenally cost effective for them.
Yeah.
And getting that strategic input then helps them to succeed. So there is a win-win situation for those organisations.
Yeah, because one of the things that I think is a challenge for an organisation, and certainly in my world anyway, is in brand. Adobe, for example, they changed the model where you used to pay £400 or £500 for the box, free updates, great. Then they flipped the model to subscription model, and that subscription has gone through the roof. But what I'm starting to see now is other software companies emerging that are almost going back to the old way of doing things. And it's that eternal balance is, do they keep it going enough that everyone onboards and buys it, or do they get eaten up by the big guys? And I'm not sure now, because I remember Figma. You heard of Figma?
No, that's not a company I know.
So Figma basically do the prototyping for websites.
Okay.
Yeah, so Adobe got their own version, Adobe XD, but most people, because Figma was like open source, ended up using that. Mm-hmm. And then obviously they made it, and then Adobe are like, ooh, anyway, long story short, I'm not sure if they went through or not, but Adobe tried to buy them, which then meant the big monster's eating yet another one up.
Yeah.
The other big monster was that is trying to eat Adobe is something like Canva, which a lot of people use for their graphic design and stuff like that, and I shudder every time I say it, but they're getting better and better. So there's almost like people are trying to eat the market of Adobe, but where the challenge comes is that when you are that big, you just buy them out. And I'm amazed even to this day that Adobe have got such a monopoly in that market, because they generally have, that most agencies couldn't function without it. For me, that's a monopoly. And I've watched them buy up different software houses over the years or whatever. I mean, I know Apple were trying to bring some other products in to make it more attractive to start using their own. But yeah, it's an interesting world because you're almost like forced into buying all these subscriptions, and there's no other alternative. And obviously, that's a business decision, isn't it? If you've got investors, you can prove the roadmap and you can make it happen. But I'm not sure the interest of the end user is at heart in those sorts of decisions.
It's big business that drives that. In our sector, consolidation around the tools that we use as IT managed service providers. There are two main players there, and they have been very acquisitive around the tool sets, and their emphasis tends to be around the interoperation and the streamlining of your internal services. So they try and create a compelling case, but it creates a degree of discomfort, that monopoly situation. And from a security perspective, I've always had a sense of unease about a single platform approach, even if it has multiple layers and multiple parts to it. I think the two risks that you run there, firstly, is an unintentional groupthink, because their methodology and the way they've approached security is likely to be consistent across their product set. And secondly, you potentially land up with, if that platform is breached in some way, they've got the run of you. So by using different platforms that work in different ways, applying different mindsets to the security problem.
You mitigate the risk.
And you've not got a breach of one doesn't leave you wide open. And the mindset they apply, so long as they don't fight against each other, that's the last thing you need. They don't have to particularly work together.
The world of APIs,
APIs, we're sort of just getting into that more with some of the platforms we use that weren't designed to work together, to get them to work together. And we're partnering with a company that maintains the API compatibility, which is a core thing. That's not something that we want to get into,
of course.
But being able to then work in a more streamlined way with a company that will maintain that for us.
So 20 years on, almost, is the business that you set out to build with your wife, is it where you want it to be? Is it further ahead? Is it behind? Where would you say on the journey?
Good question. I think when I started, I did have in mind to grow a business rather than just fill my time. Difference sort of being kind of self-employed, and that's why we chose to found a limited company at the outset. But we probably didn't really start to grow the business that we have today that employs, there's 14 of us on the team, until we took on investment in 2012. And I think then that's one significant date was the investment, and the other significant date was then 2016 when we started doing the managed services. That was a realization of that little seed that was planted when we started Gyra. And I would say, I think I'd be lying to say, what we're doing now is exactly what I conceived then. I don't think that kind of crystal ball was available at the time.
Of course.
IT is a very fast-moving area. But I think the underlying principles are the same. So my faith is important to me, and it dictates how we work with our staff team, how we work with our customers, whether it's things like, one of the things I say when I'm talking to people, either interviewing them or again when we take them on, is that if we've got the choice between doing something right or making money, we'll do it right. We care about delighting our customers, and we've not advertised since we founded Gyra, all of our business comes by referral. So doing a great job is at the heart of what we do.
Of course.
When we came back from overseas, one of the reasons was to come back to work with a customer that was getting too large for my brother, a local hospital. They're still a customer of ours now, 25 years later. People like what we do, and that comes from doing things right and caring. And my staff care about the quality service that they deliver to the customers.
What's the future? What's the next 20 years look like? Is it
how much grey hair have I got?
Well, do you see any additional services that are going to come into the business, or are you just about maintaining and helping people build spectacular things?
So clearly leveraging AI is a core part of what will help us and our customers be smarter going forwards.
Yeah.
And I think being mindful of where the development and changes are, the key is being one step ahead of the customer demand.
Yeah.
So that we can guide them on that journey and advise them and give them the confidence to move forwards. So I'd say the current emphasis that we're working with customers is helping them leverage that.
Yeah.
So we do PC and Mac, absolutely, and the answer of which one is right is it depends on the person. We don't push one or the other. Yeah. But 365, the Microsoft Online environment, is our platform that all of our customers work on.
Okay, yeah.
So Copilot is the sort of the starting point for customers around that.
Yeah.
And that enables them to at least explore the use of AI within their data set in a secure way. They're not pushing stuff out there into the wider world.
Yeah, and I think that's been an interesting thing for me, is that you got the aspects of like AI and doing it safely. I mean, DeepSeek, for example, came out a few weeks ago, people chucking their stuff on without asking any secure questions. And then you go, well, hang on a second, we're being blown away by the beauty of AI and coming up with cats riding unicycles, but actually we're not asking the deeper questions. Is it secure? Is it safe? Where's that data going? Who's messing with it? And so on and so forth. And I think for me, the two things I think have changed massively. I guess AI is there and it's going to help us build tools that we know exist in. But the two things that I've seen change massively are the internet in terms of the actual connection. Mm-hmm. I've been, where we live in the country, we use Starlink, which is Musk's thing. We've got a company out there's boxes, and they still don't believe, they're out the front, but after 2.5 years, still don't believe these barns exist. So they won't put the 5-meter line in. It's just insane. And every time we phone them out and go, you found them yet? No. We've sent them pictures, we've drawn it, we sent them good. But their computer says no. And now they're saying, we've got to plumb them in. It's like, it's just one cable from that box you built out there into here. But what I found with that is that they've spent a fortune through digging up the countryside and putting all this infrastructure in. And then you've got something like Starlink. And what's interesting with Starlink for me is that it fixes a whole load of problems. And I remember years ago looking at satellite internet. I was part of a charity that run live streaming, and we used their archaic version, which is a massive dish and like that. And now you can literally put them on the back of a RV and drive, and it'll track as you go. So I think for me, the speeds that you get, and that is a massive change in the IT world, because it just opens the door to remote areas. Imagine doing a photo shoot in the middle of nowhere. You take all the shots or the video, and then you just stream it up. I mean, that's game changing. Yeah. The second thing I think that is interesting me at the moment is the metaverse and where that's going. I mean, at the moment, the headsets are still headsets. They cover your entire head, but watching what Meta have done now, where you've got glasses, they look like the cartoon glasses. Yeah. But you can now sit in the same room and look at one another and see the person's face, yet they can still be in the metaverse, is a big shift. So I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a big shift, maybe from website-based marketing to more metaverse-based stuff. And I think that because I think the speeds are there, where they weren't before, and that's the two things I think as a brand marketeer and looking at marketing and where it could go, that's really sort of elevated my thought process. It's nearer than I thought it was. I thought it was miles away, but having done a demo at Apple and tried it on, you can already see how sports works. You can be sat in the crowd watching the game rather than watching the television. Very different experience. Yeah, very different. It feels like you're there, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I agree. The speeds are a game changer, and there's Elon Musk's Starlink won't have exclusivity, which may drive further price competitiveness. In low Earth orbit satellite broadband services. So, I think certainly in developed countries, access to high-speed internet, there will be few reasons to not. So, it's a game changer. So in terms of the future, then, in terms of now, we've talked about sort of what the next 20 years may hold. But if you look back on your career, what do you want to be known for or remembered for? out of everything that you've done so far? Because you've had you've worked in a large organisation like the BBC. You set your own company up. You've grown. You've run it for 20 years, which is amazing because not everyone lasts that long. So that's great. What do you want to be? When you hang your mouse up, if they're still around by then, on the peg, what do you want to have left behind as your legacy? How do you see it?
I think for me, the most important thing is the journey.
Mm-hmm.
So the destinations change.
Yeah.
We learn stuff as we go along, and the destination may change as a result. But how I've lived the journey is probably the most important thing, and the impact that has on the people that I encounter on the journey.
Yeah.
So whether they're my wife and my kids, whether it's the staff team that I employ, the suppliers that we deal with, and also the customers that we have, and making sure that they feel that we as a business haven't just been another company, that they sense the care that we apply that comes out of my desire to be different and actually doing stuff well and right, specifically as it relates to people and how they experience the people that they interact with and say what they get from us as a company are really, really important. And the 8 years that we spent in Seychelles, that was an important time for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was great living out my faith in that way. I then was on the board of trustees for 9 years afterwards. It's still something that's very close to my heart.
Yeah, okay.
I'm still very much passionate about what FIBA do. But about relationships with people, I think, is probably the underlying thing that hopefully people will say, oh, yeah, that was Andy, he cared.
Yeah, that's it, absolutely. So how will people be able to get hold of you, reach out to you if they wanted to connect you? They're like, you know what, actually I like what you say, I want to find out a little bit more about your business.
So Andy Platts, you'll find me on LinkedIn. The company, Jireh, Jireh Solutions, also on LinkedIn and online. So we don't do a lot of social media. LinkedIn is the only element we do, but the website is there as well. And we've got, if you happen to know it, our customers do speak well of us, and we always say to people who are interested to know more, we're always happy to introduce you to our customers. They can learn what it feels like to engage with us.
No, thank you, Andy. It's been an absolute pleasure to discuss all things techie and your journey as well, because ultimately there's always a person behind the business, and it's good to see that you've managed to grow a successful business in a very fast moving sector. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan. It's been fun.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for listening to the Purpose People podcast. How you can help us is to like and subscribe our YouTube channel. You can also subscribe to our podcasts on Apple, Spotify, Google and Amazon. That helps us get our message out there to help people go after their dreams, double down on it and be successful in life on their terms.